Hello, how are you again? We are here doing Bible survey, and this is the 10th and final lesson of this course. So by the end of this course we have gone through the whole Bible, each book briefly, and I've given you an overview of the whole Bible. So the book of Revelation is one of those books that is sometimes very hard for us to understand because it's written in a symbolic language that we are not familiar with. So the book of Revelation was written in the year 65 after Christ. So more or less 35 years after Jesus went to heaven. And it is written by the beloved John. He have given us the Gospel of John. He's given us 3 epistles, John 1, John 2, and John 3, and now he has given us the book of Revelation. So I want to encourage you, what does the book of Revelation say? In Revelation 1 verse 3 it said, "Happy is the one who reads this book, and happy are those who listen to the words of this prophetic message and obey what is written in this book. For the time is near when all these things will happen." So even if you don't understand the book, there's a very important message. If we read the book, we are blessed. And if we obey it. So there's a lot of lessons we can read. There's a lot of commands which we should apply. And if you look specifically at the 7 churches and you read through that and see the blessings of each church. It was 7 literal churches, more or less in modern day Turkey. And for each one of them, God has a specific message. And it's really encouraged. It said, "I write to the angel of the book of the church." So it's written to the messenger or the leader of the church. And there's an angel. So it gives us some kind of reference that somehow maybe God have commanded an angel to each church to protect the church. And then there's messages. "I have this against you. And this, what you do is good." So in each of those churches, there's lessons for us to apply to our churches. Are we lukewarm? Are we allowing false teachers in our church? So read through that, apply it to your church. But remember, the book of Revelation is a whole book. And it ends up, the book of Revelation ends with this beautiful message in chapter 21, where it says very clearly for us that we must not add to the book or we must not subtract to the book. So, and then it also adds and it encourages, "I am coming soon. Happy are those who obey the prophetic messages of this book." Chapter 22 verse 7. And it ends with the message, "I am coming soon. I am coming soon." Everyone who hears this must say, "Come. Come, everyone who's thirsty, and accept the waters of life, whoever wants it." And then it ends, verse 18, "I, John Solomon, warn everyone who hears this prophetic words of this book. Anyone who adds anything to them, God will add to their punishment the plagues described in this book. And anyone who takes anything away from this prophetic book, God will take away from them their share in the fruit of the tree of life of the holy city, which are described in these books." And again it ends, "Come, Lord Jesus, come." So this book encourages us to read it, and God will reveal it to us, even though we will not fully understand it, as we will discuss the different ways how to interpret it. But the message is a message of encouragement and hope, and a reminder that Jesus is coming soon. So in your notes on page 152, there's 3 primary ways in which you can understand or interpret it. The first one there is, some people see it largely as the future. It is judgments that occur near the end of the present age, close to the second coming of Christ. Then there's people that see the book is present, It means it is the struggle of the church right through the century from Jesus' first coming to his second coming. This ideal is called idealism. And then some people see it as the book as fulfilled in the past, as a covenantal lawsuit against the unbelieving Jerusalem and rejecting her Messiah. And this view is called preterism. So the three views, one is future, one is present, and one is past. So that is the basically, some people say it refers to the future, some said it is now happening, and some said it had already happened. So how do we interpret the big question is the 1,000 years, the 1,000 years of peace that is referred to. How should we interpret that? So the futurists believe it is a literal 1,000 years of Christ reigning from Jerusalem after the second coming. So Christ will come and he will rule for 1,000 years. And this is called premillennialism. Millennium is 1,000, so premillennialism, because Jesus come back before the millennium. So Jesus will come back from heaven and then he will rule on this planet for 1,000 years. The idealist said it is the 1,000 years is symbolic. It is a symbolic of a long period from the first to the second coming. So this time we are living in now is symbolic of the 1,000 years. And they use the Bible that says one day is like 1,000 years. So it's a period of time. So this is called amillennialism. They believe we are in the millennium now, and it's obvious more than 1,000 years. And then there is the post-millennialists, believing that the gospel gradually changes the nation so that Christianity dominates the world. There is a 1,000-year period of Christian dominance worldwide, which ends with the rebellion and the second coming. Jesus come back after the millennium. So gradually the gospel is spread over the world, and then there's 1,000 years where Christianity dominates the world. So if you look at them, all of them have rightful claims, and there is theological background and ways why they claim that way. So the ideal is that you go and figure out which one do you think is the right one, because not one of them can claim to be the only right one, but there's three main acceptable ways, and we as believers must give grace to each other for the way in which we interpret it. The beautiful is the message of each one is very encouraging. So the futuristic view, or the premillennialist, the church should hold fast to the gospel and know that even in the great tribulation, Christ and his people will be victorious. So it's a message of encouragement and hope. And that is what the book of Revelation tells us. It is a message of hope. The present, the amillennialists say the church is always in a struggle in a sinful world. Therefore, God's people should be encouraged that the victories in heavenly places are being carried out in the world. So, a message of encouragement. And then the post-millennial said the church should see the judgment of Jerusalem, that grace is never to be taken for granted, that the church is currently present in his church, that Christ is present in his church to bring about the fullness of the kingdom through the spirit-driven gospel. And there in the outline you can see there's three main scholars. The futuristic is George Ladd, the present is William Hendrickson, and the past is David Chilton. So those are great scholars who made profound contributions to our understanding, and they each one have a different view. So let us look at the first one. Let us look at what does the premillennialists say. So the premillennialists say the first vision, the 7 letters, the seven churches are the 7 ages. So there you can see on page 154, letter of Ephesus is the apostolic church. That is the first church, from the foundation of the church in the book of Acts to around the death of the last apostle. That is the apostolic church. Then the church of the Roman persecution from the year 100 to the year 313. The year 313, a great Roman emperor called Constantine accepted Christianity, and the era of severe persecution actually changed for more or less 300 years, and that is called the age of Constantine. And that is the church of Pergamus. It's followed by the church of Thyatira. That is generally referred to the Dark Ages, when the Roman Catholic Church ruled most of Europe, and there was quite a difficult domination of the church, because the church and the state was inseparable, and there was a lot of corruption in the church in that era. Then Church of Sardis is the time of the Reformation. You will read and learn about Martin Luther, who called the church back to salvation through faith alone. And the Reformation took place in Europe, and the Reformation reformed the church, and that is the Church of Sardis. And then by that time it was also the age of discovery, when the boats discovered new worlds like South Africa, North America, South America, and the world opened up. And then the church realized, but we have a responsibility to take the mission, the gospel, to all these new places that was discovered, and that is called the Church of Missions, and that is Philadelphia. Philadelphia also means brotherly love. And then of course the last age is the Church of Laodicea, which is the Church of Apostasy. We can see that from the turn of the century, from more or less the First World War, the Second World War, the time we live in now, lots of conflict, difficult situations, and they believe that is the Church of the Apostasy. Then the second vision, the throne room of judgment. So here, after this era, God comes and he raptures the church. He takes the believers out of this world, and the world is fallen into judgment. And that is the whole era of the Great Tribulation. So the Antichrist returns to Jerusalem and the church and persecutes and kills many. Christ comes again and defeats the armies of the world. The millennium begins, and Christ reigns on earth for 1,000 years. And then the fourth vision is the New Jerusalem. After the millennium, there's a final judgment, and the eternal kingdom begins. So different eras according to this view called premillennialism. Then the next one, the idealist world view, or the amillennialist. They believe Revelation is arranged in 7 cycles. You will read Revelation, there's 7 stories and 7 cycles, and each one is a different story of the same era, beginning at Jesus' first coming and end at his second coming. So the whole church age until the second coming, with different emphasis in the battle for the kingdom of light and darkness. So the final judgment takes place on an increased emphasis in each section. So 7 stories, like the stories of the church, the stories of the 7 seals, the 7 trumpets, the woman and the dragon, the 7 bowls, the fall and the rise, and the judgment. You can see there in the outline on page 130, 155, and page 153 and page 154. The middle line, you see there's 7 eras, and I believe each one is a description of the same thing. So the second one is Christ in the midst. Oh, sorry, that is the first one. The first one is Christ in the midst. So that is the story of the 7 books, the 7 letters to the 7 churches. So the kingdom and the church belong to Christ. He is always present through his Spirit. He will not abandon his church to eternal sin or external persecution. Internal sin, he will judge that, he will change that, or external persecution, he will be with his church. Then the second one is the 7 seals. The 7 seals and the trumpets and the bowls of the wrath refer not to a specific event, but is symbolic of the battle of the human conduct and divine moral government that are opposed to the church in the world. The next era is the 7 trumpets. The 7 trumpets are blown, and it is God's retributive judgment on the wicked and the opposing world. So that is chapter 8 to chapter 11 is the 7 trumpets. And then we have the story of the woman and the dragon, and that is the symbolic of Christ and Satan, who is in conflict with each other, but Christ protected the church against the severe onslaught of Satan. So the beast is a symbolic of the Roman opposition of the 1st century, but every time in every cycle of the church, in every time, doesn't matter which area you live, there's always an opposing force, which might it be a community or may it be a government. The church is always have an enemy. The enemy is Satan trying to destroy the church. Then we have the 7 bowls, chapter 15 and 16. So like the trumpets, it's not specific events, but judgment is poured out on those who receive the mark of the beast. They worship the dragon, they are friends with the beast, and they are the harlots of this chapter. It is those who accept the ways of the world. We have the 2 kingdoms, Christ's kingdom and the kingdom of Satan. And those who are in the kingdom of Satan received his characteristics, and they are clearly seen by the ways they do it. Then we have fall of the false, so the dark and the light. The second coming bring ultimate confrontation between light and darkness. And then the judgment and the new, chapter 20 to 22. The millennium is not a little 1,000 years, but a metaphor for a long time. 1,000 years is long, so it's the time from Christ's first coming to his second coming. So they believe we are in this time. It is here, but not yet complete. Christ will come. Satan will deceive the nations, but Christ will come and he will destroy the strong man Satan, and final judgment will take place, and ultimate paradise awaits. Then we have the last view, which is the post-millennialists. So they say the first area is soon. Number A there on page 154. They believe that the first audience of the book Revelations were the 7 churches. So it was written to the 7 churches, and they read and they understood the images because it was written in their language. They understand symbolic meaning. The book begin and end with a message that the time is short and Jesus is coming soon. For that to be 2,000 years make no sense. So it would only make sense for them. So it was written to them and they understood it. And they understood the symbol meaning as happening in their time. What happened in the 1st century would include the exaltation of Christ and his judgment. If we examine the Gospels or the epistles, we find clues that will help us understand the judgment and the conflict between Rome, Israel and the early church. So they understood what it means. The Gospel have clues, so according to this interpretation, they look at what Jesus said and then they apply it to the book of Revelation. For instance, Jesus talked about the judgment in Matthew 21, the parable of the tenant, the woe of the Pharisees, and his lament over Jerusalem. So all those things must be taken in consideration. And then of course Matthew 24, where Jesus talked about, he cried over Jerusalem, and he talked about the things that will happen soon. And he talks also to the disciples this, how Jerusalem will be destroyed. So the destruction of Jerusalem is seen as God's judgment, and that is how we must interpret it. So a few points there on page 157. Number A, the gospel of the kingdom is preached to the whole world. That is fulfilled by that time, because we've seen Matthew 24 said the gospel of the kingdom will preach to the whole world, and then the end will come. So the end refers to the judgment of Jerusalem. So the apostles, by the time Jerusalem was destroyed, they preached the gospel through the Roman Empire. They went to far as India, Spain and Africa. Then the abomination of desolation in Luke chapter 21 verse 20 talks about the armies surrounding Jerusalem, and we know that the Roman emperor in that time, he came into Jerusalem, came into the temple, and he put a huge idol there of himself, and that is, they believe, referred to the desolation of the temple. So God was shaking them. It talks about the coming of the Son of Man. God comes in many times other than the end times. When he comes, it is judgment. So it refers to God coming in the judgment. And this generation is the generation that listened to that. So they believe it happened, the judgment happened to them as Jerusalem and Israel was destroyed. We see Pilate before the crowd. Pilate excused himself. We know the story, and blamed the execution of Jesus because he's innocent on the crowd. And the crowd said, let his blood fall on our hands. Let we be responsible. And that judgment took place in the year 70, when they were literally judged. Many of them were killed, violently slaughtered. Many of the priests who condemned Jesus were physically crucified outside Jerusalem. The historian Josephus said that about 10,000 people were crucified outside Jerusalem when Jerusalem fell. So a horrible thing happened there. Number 4, fall on us. It literally fell upon them, those generation, that people that witnessed the death of Christ, who were unrepented, who didn't become part of the church, they were judged according to this view. So Jesus, the theme of Jesus, the theme of judgment on Jerusalem for the rejection of Christ dominate the Passover week, as Jesus denounced the doom of Jerusalem for rejecting him. Then Revelation, judgment on Jerusalem in the year 70. Just like Ezekiel, John sees the Son of Man in all his glory, and Jesus calls him to speak his words of judgment and salvation to the people of God. That is, if you look at Revelation, that is chapter 1, chapter 2, and 3 is the historical prologue. As part of the covenant, recounts the past relationship between God and his people. Here the prologue comes from the form of 7 letters. So the 7 letters of Ephesus talks about language of paradise, the tree of life. Smyrna is the rich, poor but rich. Pergamus is the wilderness time of Biliam. Thyatira is a monarchy, son of God and Jezebel. Sardis is the exile, the remnant. Philadelphia returned from exile. That time is the time when Israel was rebuilt by Ezra and Nehemiah, and Laodicea is the apostolic age. So they take the 7 books as an era from creation, from the tree of life, up to the time where Jerusalem was rebuilt. The 7 seals is called the stipulation. Like Moses, the Lamb has given, Moses was given the law, so the Lamb is given the books in front of him, and there is the symbolic of the Passover symbolism. Chapter 6 talks about the Pentecost symbolism. Chapter 7, the Feast of the Tabernacle. So instead of Feast of Salvation, Jerusalem has become the enemy. Yet an uncountable number of new tribes, the church, are to be redeemed. Then the 7 trumpets, chapter 8 to 14, is called the sanctions, the blessings and the curses, as in the Old Testament. Then we have the covenant succession, the 7 bowls, chapter 15 to 22. The saints sing the song of Moses, which is a judgment song for unbelief, the false bride, the war of Babylon. Unbelieving Jerusalem would rather serve Rome and Caesar, and is destroyed, and the feast of the Lamb begins. The fall of Jerusalem ushers the complete age of the church and the people of God now abiding in the holiest of holiest. So that is the three views. Number 5 on page 159, we see the exaltation of Christ. So regardless of the view, doesn't matter which view you see, each chapter describes Christ in a different and a beautiful way. So chapter 1, he's the resurrected and the glorified Lord. Chapter 2 and 3, the exalted Lord of the church. Chapter 5, he's the Lamb of God. Chapter 6, the judge of the scrolls and the seals. Chapter 7, the mighty angel seals, 144, so they worship the Lamb. Chapter 8, the mediator of prayers for deliverance. In chapter 10, Jesus is described of the Lord as the new covenant. Chapter 11, the kingdom of Christ. Chapter 12, Jesus is described as the male child, and Michael who delivers his people. Chapter 14 is the Lamb, the new song, and the Son of Man who harvests. Chapter 15, the Song of the Lamb. Chapter 18, the Angel of Glory who judges the false bride. Chapter 19, the bridegroom and the rider on the white horse. Chapter 20, he's the judge. And chapter 21 and 22, the Lamb at rest, ruling on his throne. So the book of Revelation is sometimes difficult, and I want to encourage you to read the book, be open to the Holy Spirit to reveal it to you, look at the different views and figure that out for yourself. Which view do you think is the right view? And if you can't even figure that out, just read the book and listen to God speaking to you, and then look at how the book describes Jesus. And remember, if we read the book, we are blessed, and the main topic of the book is Jesus is coming soon and we must be prepared. So the questions there, have a look. What are the three views? It's good that you understand it. People will always ask you. So what does the futurist think of the seven churches? What the idealist think of the seven churches? And what is the preterist think of the seven churches? So number 10, what is the most important theme to see in the book of Revelation? Just what is the book of Revelation all about? So we have gone through the Bible survey, and I encourage you to read through the whole Bible, pray through it, and if God blesses you, preach us through the whole book. So the next course, we will see how do we interpret the Bible. This is an overview of the whole Bible, and now how do we interpret each different aspect. How do we interpret the law? How do we interpret historic books? How do we interpret poetic books, prophetic books, the Gospels? How do we interpret Acts? What is the difference between the epistles and the book of Revelation? Each one's got a different literary style, and therefore we need to interpret them, each one differently. Be blessed.